Hey everyone, Ted Wyman here for the Winnipeg Sun, along with hockey writer Scott Billeck, and today we're going to discuss free agency so far for the Winnipeg Jets. Maybe not as active a period as we thought it might be. Maybe there was a chance for more trades. Maybe there was a chance for a couple of different kinds of signings. But the Jets have added a few players through trade and through free agency. And Scott, I don't think they're done yet, but if you're just looking at how they've done so far, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to do it on a grade system, probably a C at this point. I mean, they've addressed defensive depth. They've addressed their second line center position for the next year. They have yet to address a top four defenseman. And some might say, Dylan Sandberg could be that guy, but I do think you need an insurance policy in place, and even more than that. Maybe if you can get one and not have to rush Dylan through, into the league or whatever, you can maybe put him on the third pairing and just let him kind of grow and get used to the game at first. I mean, that might be more ideal. So they haven't really addressed that. They have been looking. I know they've looked into Mackenzie Weegar before the Pietrangelo news happened, before Nate Schmidt went to Vancouver. So I know that they have been looking. Again, it's not easy to get guys to come here. It's not easy to get guys to waive their no trade clause. Nate Schmidt didn't. I don't know exactly how much interest the Jets had in Nate Schmidt, but it wouldn't have mattered because he was on they're on his own no trade list. So so far, they've done what they need to do in some respects. In other respects, they haven't. But at the same time, you also think this is a weird offseason. The interview period wasn't long, there wasn't any interview period prior to it. So there's still
tons of names still out there.
Exactly. So I mean, that's part of the, that's it. And trades can be hatched, down the line. There's still quite a while until hockey starts again. So so for now, I'd probably give it a C overall. But there's time for that grade to improve.
So they get Paul Stastny to come in and play second line center through a trade. Seems like a pretty good move for 1 year. They sign a couple of guys like Nathan Beaulieu and Lucas Spiza, who were already with the team. And then they get a couple of guys on free agency, Nate Thompson, a depth player, but with a lot of veteran experience, and Derek Forbort, who I wonder, as a defenseman, if it really comes down to it, could he play in those top 4 minutes?
Yeah, I mean that is a possibility, right? He's there, and right now is that insurance piece for Dylan Sandberg, and could play those minutes if need be. Very much a stay-at-home defenseman. You're not going to get the offensive production from him that you would get from like a Dustin Byfuglien or whatever, right? But a big body back there to help with that toughness, because the team wasn't very tough on the back end this year, and part of that had to do with injuries. Part of that has to do just with the makeup of the team. Getting Beaulieu back, a good 6th or 7th defenseman, depending on how they plan on using him. I don't suspect that they want to be using Lucas Spiza. I know they re-signed him, obviously, and it's a one-way deal, but he's again an injury insurance policy more than anything. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to address with Forbort and other guys is they need the NHL depth this year. You don't want to be bringing up guys from the AHL and trying to fill those holes when you're also trying to contend for a playoff spot. Last year was probably a pretty an anomaly when it comes to injuries for a team. But that doesn't say that lightning doesn't strike twice, and it could happen again. You just never know, and we don't even know what's happening with the season. But I think they've done well on the back end to get that depth going. I don't think they need it as much on forward, because they do have it kind of internally, and they've re-signed Appleton. Jansen Harkins, I assume, will get re-signed. We'll see what happens with Jack Roslovic, and we'll probably talk about him a little bit here as well. But yeah, I mean, I think Forbort could slide up into that spot if need be. I think the ideal scenario would be they can figure out how to get a top 4 D man without having to make a blockbuster deal that would involve, a Line or an Ehlers or somebody.
Right, that's just important. And Forbort is
Yeah.
interesting about him. He's big. He's 6'4". He's 220 pounds. He's the very thing the Jets really didn't have when they played against the Calgary Flames in their series and lost. He played several seasons alongside Drew Doughty, who, if he's good enough to play alongside Drew Doughty, sure, he's good enough to play alongside Neil Pionk. I mean, in all honesty, I think that he certainly is a guy who could handle those minutes if they need him to, but also would make a very good number 5-6 defenseman on the left side for the Jets. You did touch on very quickly, and we should as well, the rumors surrounding Jack Roslovic, a former first-round draft pick of the Jets, as well as Sami Niku. A little bit of fire to that smoke, isn't there, Scott?
Yeah, there is. I mean, the Jets are shopping both him and both Jack Roslovic and Sami Niku. I think that's probably normal. Jack Roslovic is going to have a tough time cracking this top 6. Right now, he also probably hasn't done enough, in my mind, to warrant that spot at this point. There's other guys, including maybe even Andrew Kopp, that would, be the heir apparent at that point still before Jack Roslovic would be. So, yeah, Roslovic still is, a talent at his age, young, obviously still, but potential there. And I think same with Sami Niku. Sami Niku is coming off a year that, out of his control, injuries and that sort of thing, car accidents. He's not far removed from being the AHL Defenseman of the Year, but he's also way down the depth chart in Winnipeg. And I think if you can package both those guys together, or maybe one for in a trade that would get you a top 4 defenseman, and another in a deal that might be able to ship out Matthew Perreault the final year of his contract to open up some cap space, you could probably see that. At the end of the day, could also just get a couple picks back for both of them. Who knows? I mean, I think you would want to get more for Jack Roslovic. I think you'd want to be using him in a deal for, potentially like a Mackenzie Weegar, that type of, player.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not surprising. I mean, if you don't want to move Line in, I don't think the Jets ever did, but you also needed to make their team better. Well, now they don't have to worry about that because Stastny kind of fills that role of that second line center. So I think at this point, now you're starting to try and move lesser assets in a Roslovic or a Niku. And I mean, we'll see what happens, but they're both on the market for Winnipeg, and they are trying to, again, trying to find that top 4 left defenseman. So
the hunt continues.
Happens. Yeah, exactly.
That's certainly what I have been suggesting is the best course of action. Like in recent weeks, just when all the Line rumors were out there, to me, it just seemed like this team had some assets that it could move to make sure it gets better. Mm-hmm. And realistically, we also thought there was going to be players that were going to be available for very low prices. And Paul Stastny and Nate Schmidt, who goes to Vancouver for a 3rd rounder in 2022, went for extremely low prices. And there's been a lot of movement like that in the NHL right now. And honestly, that's what I think the Jets should be holding out for. That's why I didn't think it was the right time for that blockbuster trade of a Line either. And also, the free agent list is still chock full of players. There's a lot of guys still available who are unrestricted free agents and lots of time to make it happen. So, Scott, I do think we'll see more from the Winnipeg Jets. Their salary cap is filling up considerably, however. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Kevin Cheveldayoff works that in the coming weeks. But we'll be back with more Jet setting this week. For Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman for the Winnipeg Sun.